Good morning, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is the Ukraine War News Update for the 18th of July 2023. As I've been doing for the last few days, this will be split into two parts. Please check them both out. I do that because they are shorter and more digestible, and also because at least one of them gets restricted by YouTube, so it helps in that respect. Anyway, we'll go to where we usually start, which is the general staff figures from Ukraine for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply, of course, and some fairly interesting category numbers here, particularly in the artillery. We'll come to that. 710 liquidated personnel, so that's an uptick of troops lost. That makes me wonder whether it's one of two things, really. An uptick in military activity on the front lines, maybe some attacks in certain places, or it's going to be a hit on maybe troop accumulations behind the line with storm shadows. We've heard of a number of hits recently. There's a claim of 200 people being taken out in a hit a few days back, but that would be a bit of a delay from then till this number. I don't know, but yeah, 710 is moved up by a couple of hundred. 4 tanks, 17 APVs, so it's a lot of IFVs, infantry fighting vehicles, or armored personnel carriers, or mine resistant ambush protection vehicles, MRAPs. Any number of those, probably IFVs. Then we have 38 pieces of artillery, wow, and 4 multiple launch rocket systems. Really significant numbers for both of those categories there. The Russians are really must be starting to struggle in terms of artillery. Now, we know they have a number of artillery pieces in stock back in Russia in certain different locations, but they have been stored outside for decades upon decades as an agreement with the Americans. You store them outside so you can keep an eye on them, but it means that they corrode, right? And all the moving parts, it becomes more problematic. Some of these self-propelled guns, particularly, will be in trouble. The towed howitzers are, I guess, easier, less complex pieces of kit, but they are being cannibalized anyway. So even though they might, on paper, from maybe slightly poorer resolution satellite imagery, you're counting 1,000 pieces of artillery. Do they all have their barrels? Do they all have their moving parts in place? Have they been taken apart already? So I think the Russians are going to be struggling. We are hearing complaints on the ground from troops themselves saying we do not have counter-battery fire. You're hearing it from commanders who have been dismissed, complaining primarily about counter-battery fire and loss of ammunition. So I think this is going to start really affecting the Russian capability to use artillery. 11 drones, that's not from last night, it's from the night before. I think there was a drone and cruise attack from the Russians. It was a kind of bit of a response for the Kerch Bridge being hit, and 27 vehicles and fuel tanks. Again, that feeds into the artillery situation where we are seeing trucks getting taken out on the way to supply troops and other vehicles, Bukankas and such like. No special equipment, no anti-aircraft warfare systems today. No aircraft. Now, we have seen an aircraft being lost over the Black Sea. I don't know whether they don't include things that sort of are lost on their own accord. So we go, I think that might be so this is it. So turning out to be a bad day near the water for the Russians. This happened just off the coast of Yeysk, which is opposite Mariupol across the Gulf. So this is a Russian plane in Russian territory, but they are now minus a Su-25, a plunge into the sea. They lost one pilot and the other one has 2 broken legs. So we'll just have a look at this. It just sort of falls out the sky. So it looks like there's some kind of mechanical problem.
Снижается. Охренеть! Самолет упал, и этот спарашютировался.
Anyway, he seems pretty happy about that. He goes on to have a bit of a chuckle, but that is a loss of a plane. That will be a bit of an issue for the Russians. Not just the expense of a fixed-wing aircraft, but the loss of 2 pilots there. And then to sort of build up this idea of how the Russians are losing this equipment. Here we have a HIMARS strike on a Russian positions on the left bank of Kherson. And in one HIMARS strike, you get 3 bits of kit taken out. And this is again, it's sort of indicative of how HIMARS are being used and how effective they are. So you've got 3 bits of kit in the tree line there, one HIMARS strike, and then all 3 suddenly, well, not suddenly, all 3 eventually catch fire, and that's the end of them. So that's a really significant hit by HIMARS there. And I don't know whether there were subsequent, there was subsequent shelling from the Ukrainians, but you see eventually 3 bits of kit taken out. Keeping them so close together is probably ill-advised. And then here we have, feeding into the kind of numbers. Column of 2 tanks and 2 infantry fighting vehicles. 2 tanks and 1 IFV were claimed to be destroyed as a result. So here we have some music that I don't want to hear. So we have vehicles moving up and being taken out, so on and so forth. So you get the idea. There are large numbers of vehicles. There's video footage of lots of things getting taken out yesterday. Now this is an important bit of kit. This is a Tulip destroyed by a HIMARS. So what's a Tulip? It's a self-propelled mortar, 240mm mortar. So this is a really substantial bit of kit, as in it can deliver quite a lot of damage. Obviously, the range is less than an SPG as self-propelled howitzer, but these mortars, 240mm caliber mortar, can give a real deal out some real damage. So this was then destroyed. The weapon is designed to destroy the most fortified areas, shelters, command posts, and other artillery. And here it is. Turn off the music. Here it is hit again by HIMARS, and you can see all the tungsten there. It doesn't have to have a direct hit on top of it for that to do huge amounts of damage, and that's the end of that self-propelled mortar. So yeah, as we can see, lots of equipment being taken out. Here we have a hit on supposedly a command center. I'm not sure where this is, but and I'm not sure what's used to hit it. Could be JDAM there. It's fairly significant explosion taking place. Or it could be a direct hit with the HIMARS, I guess. But if that is a command and control center or headquarters, then that is going to have quite a meaningful effect on the Russian military command. And on the other side, we have seen, obviously, Ukraine are losing equipment as well. This is significant because I haven't seen a Bayraktar taken out for some time, and it's carrying a munition as well. So it's carrying a MAM-L munition. This is a Bayraktar in the Kherson Oblast. And why this is significant is that since the beginning of the war, Bayraktars, we've seen an adaptation for them to be used more in a reconnaissance mode rather than an offensive mode, because they were actually getting shot down with quite a high frequency. There was so much talk about Bayraktars at the beginning of the war and how successful they were, and it really drove sales for the company and all sorts. But actually, the reality was that was a really clever bit of PR from the Ukrainians, and they released footage. They did have some success with these at the beginning of the war, but they released that footage over a time period that made you think that they would continue to have that success. But actually, all of that was happening, I believe, around one point, and then the Russians adapted and were able to shoot them down. So they did lose quite a few Bayraktars at the beginning of the war, but you got the feeling that they were having great success with them for much longer than they were. Then they changed to use them in a more reconnaissance mode. Right, Russian official says that one part of the Crimean Bridge. So yesterday, as I told you, the Crimean Bridge was hit probably with unmanned sea vehicles that were packed with explosives, exploded underneath, and damaged part of the road bridge. Well, the Russian official is now saying that actually it can't be restored. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Marat Kusinilin said that one span of the part of the road bridge for vehicles is completely destroyed and cannot be restored, and they're going to have a 250-meter. I don't know how they're going to do it, but it'll be a kind of a way around that. But they apparently cannot restore that. However, they have got it to work again. So they've actually repaired this part enough that amazingly they can drive on it, and so I think it was open to traffic, limited traffic of limited weight last night. So that will ease their logistical woes at least somewhat. Now, I think in response to that, uh, as well as them possibly being other responses, there was a massive drone and missile attack last night. 36 Shahed drones were launched, of which 31 were shot down, and all six Caliber cruise missiles were shot down, as well as a reconnaissance drone, mainly, as far as I can gather, in the Odessa region. Russia attacks Odessa with missiles and drones, injuring one. Russian forces launched 6 Caliber cruise missiles and a significant number of Shahed kamikaze drones against Odessa Oblast, injuring at least one resident. I don't know whether there's more damage and targets hit than the Ukrainians are letting on. They're obviously not forthcoming with successful strikes from the Russians, particularly. So it may well be that everything was shot down, and those that weren't shot down didn't do much damage, or it could be that those, what was it, 5 Shahed drones did some significant damage. Who knows? But what has come out is this image is going a bit viral at the moment. Part of the engine of a Shahed drone shot down today over Mykolaiv region. Made in Ireland is part one of the parts there, and we know this already. We know that the Shaheds are jam packed full of co-opted material that they've got, probably bona fide above board, or through third parties and third party sellers. So it's not like this Irish company knows that will be eventually used in a military drone in Iran. But this is obviously something that needs seriously looking at, loopholes being tightened. That's not to say the Irish are killing Ukrainians, of course. But no, in all seriousness, I think how many parts were found out to be American in one of the last analyses of a Shahed? You know, quite a lot, spread throughout the allied nations as well. Russian proxy claims that 30 drones were downed over Crimea. So the Russian installed proxy head of Crimea claimed on July the 18th that 28 drones were eliminated over the occupied peninsula by Russian air defenses overnight. So we don't know, again, like I've just said the other way, that we don't know that actually some of those Russian drones didn't get through and cause some damage in the Odessa region. We don't know that the Ukrainian drones didn't get through and do some damage in Crimea. It would surprise me if Russia shot down all 28, but they might well have done. They are particularly worried in Crimea, obviously around the bridge too, of such attacks, and so I think they've got fairly decent air defenses there. Now, talking about the Crimean bridge strike yesterday, I have seen a whole array of responses that have been translated from sort of Telegram and social media posts, Twitter and whatnot, of Russians. I think I might do a little chat in an extra, might do that today, about the trouble going forward with changing Russian views. Now, this might not be representative of all Russia, okay, but there are lots and lots of views like this, which is, I am personally shocked by the meanness of these restless Nazis, says one holidaymaker, and especially by Zelensky. My husband and I planned a vacation in the Crimea for several months. We have thought of everything to the smallest detail. What, like it's in a war? Like it's an illegally annexed territory in a war zone? Have you really considered that? Oh my God! Someone's blown up a bridge. Oh, what do you think, you numbnut? Sorry. Right, to continue. That's not what they say. So, we have thought of everything to the smallest detail. And now they tell us not to worry and go through Mariupol? Well, yes, so that they would blow us up somewhere on another bridge? Special thanks to England for teaching the Ukrainians to fire on other people's bridges. Yeah, because, hey, it's all our fault. I'm sorry about that. Totally our fault. I will pray that France will be taught to bombard the bridges of the British. So watch out, London Bridge. Those damned French are going to be on it again. I'm sure that prayer will work. I'm sure God, if she exists, is sitting up there going, "Oh, good idea. Okay, French, here's some pixie dust. Go for it. Take out London Bridge. Pesky Brits. What are you doing?" No. But the serious point here is that, and I've seen a plethora of these responses, is that there are just tons of Russians who are thinking it's still a great idea to go on holiday to Crimea. Like, what's going on there? So, what is the narrative about this war? And the what are people actually being fed within Russia, such that their understanding is that it's a cool idea to go to Crimea on summer holiday? What are they not being told about what's going on? Because I'm hearing drones, hearing about drone strikes, seeing drone strikes, seeing that there's a Zaporizhia front line not too distant, there's a Kherson front line not too distant from Crimea, and that it's probably a bit dodgy to go on holiday there, not least the Kerch Bridge, right? What are they not hearing? So is there a lack of decent information about this war for Russian population? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, there are still, of course, so many Russian people who are massively pro Kremlin war effort, such that all Ukrainians are Nazis, Zelensky's a Nazi, and it's all the British fault, so on and so forth. So if and when this war comes to a conclusion, and say Ukraine prevail, you have this massive ongoing problem of what Russian people truly think. And that's not something that's easily disabused. So it's not something that people suddenly go, "Oh yeah, do you know what? I was completely wrong. All that information was nonsense, and I was being fed complete lies by my government." You'll be having people entrenching and blaming the West for the loss of the Russian war effort, right? How do you change that? How do you turn that tanker around when you've got apparently the Russian education system brainwashing their children at the moment? How do you change that? This is a generational problem to solve, and yeah, I think that's just a huge issue. And Steve Rosenberg here reporting, BBC, doing a really good job of reporting in Russia. After the attack on the Kerch Bridge, Russian newspapers encouraging readers to go ahead with summer holidays in occupied Crimea, suggesting a 400-kilometer detour to get there, but warning against too many stops along the way because the sides of the road might be mined. Yeah, so we have this situation where they are downplaying, because obviously they want money to flow into Crimea. They need it to be a viable place, and they want the narrative is keep calm, everyone, because hey, we're easily winning the war type thing, and that's not necessarily the truth, is it? So I just find that fascinating, that whole situation. Right, going on to other bits and pieces. A temporary bridge of 250 meters long, so this is kind of building off on what I said earlier, will be built next to the damaged part of the Kerch Bridge, said the Vice Prime Minister. So that is it is a workaround. How soon that will happen, I don't know. Tigran Kirsayan, who is married to the head of Russia Today's Margarita Simonyan. She's our favorite propagandist, right? It's either her or Solovyov. They're all mental. And is considered by some to be a prominent representative of Russia's intellectual elites. Says that Russia does not want to be friends with the West. It just wants to be feared. And there's a YouTube video of an interview or him saying just that. I think this is a really on point idea that he has there, which is Russia aren't interested in being friends. They're not in this to make friends and influence people. They have a history now of, I mean, if you think of the whole Cold War, it's about sowing discord and sowing fear into the population of others, either those under them, those within their kind of imperial borders, Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union, but also with those outside of those borders. It's not about saying, "Hey, we're cool. Come and we think you would want to come and live here because we're so cool." But they're not enticing people in that way. They're making people scared. It's like you won't want to live here. We don't want you to come and live here because hey, we are the big scary Russian bear. So this is still their kind of mindset, I think, which is we don't want to be friends with you. We want you to fear us. And when you understand that, you understand a lot about their kind of decision making. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting insight. Right, I know I talk about Elon Musk too much, whatever, but I did talk about his claim yesterday, right, which was really ill-advised, pro-Russian claim about artillery. I want the best outcome for people. Russia has at least four times the artillery of Ukraine and 10 times the ammunition, blah, blah, blah. And it was all complete nonsense, right? And I was challenging every word of it. And I was saying this is just repeating Kremlin propaganda. Well, why, Elon? Why? When the Russian government cites you as making a reasonable argument aligned with the Russian talking points, that's not a good thing. Right, so we've got the Russian embassy in South Africa literally using his argument. Elon Musk exposes US hypocrisy over transfer of cluster munitions to Ukraine. He was talking about how it debases the American position, and it's like the Russians already do this, and you are not talking about them debasing. And now Russia just get hold of that. America has always condemned as evil those who use cluster bombs, but now we send them to be used. And Elon Musk, just shut up because you are giving ammunition to the Russians, and here it is. Directly, propaganda, you are being utilized. You are a useful idiot in this context for Russia. And I don't care. I often get like people saying, "Oh, Elon Musk is amazing. You're a douche." To me, I'm like, evidence. Right. Deputy commander of the joint grouping of Russian troops in Ukraine, Surovikin, has been stripped of his powers. His fate is still being decided, says a spokesman of the Ukrainian intelligence there, basically. We have not heard from Surovikin for some time. This is the Butcher of Syria, General Armageddon, known as several things. He was supposed to be allied to Wagner, and as a result, he seems to be the scapegoat. Now, there are claims that a good many people are being purged. There are rumors that a whole number of generals and military administration officials have been, disappeared under investigation for this kind of positioning. All is not well, as I keep saying, in the Russian military hierarchy. What else? So, talking about Wagner, I hadn't really reported, but Wagner are on the way to Belarus. There have been a number of convoys spotted going to Belarus. Large Wagner columns seen heading to Belarus, and they're Wagner because a lot of them fly the Wagner flags. It's just, an awful lot of talk about this. Another convoy of Wagner PMC has arrived in Belarus. The convoy consists of at least 20 vehicles of various modifications. The vehicles are moving with Russian flags and the symbols of the PMC Wagner. This is at least a third column with mercenaries, which has arrived in the village of Sil since July the 11th. In the photo, satellite images of the tent city in the village made by Maxar on July the 14th and July the 16th. So it was empty on the 14th and looking a lot more full on the 16th, or fuller. Just this is, and then you've got Lukashenko saying, Wagner are currently in their camps. If Belarus needs them, we will instantly call upon PMC Wagner to defend the nation. But then you've got other pro-Western Belarusian figures saying, no, this is not what we want. They're probably exiled figures, just saying this is not good for Belarus at all. So just trying to find. I couldn't find. So there was a Belarusian leader that was, shouting about how this is pretty terrible. Lots of stuff to do with that. I haven't really reported on it, so apologies for that. But I don't know what they're going to do there. Wagner, I guess it's kind of their only option because they're seen as a black sheep now. They've been pardoned, but they're not quite, cool with the Kremlin, I guess. and so they have got this weird in between existence. I don't really know what they're going to be doing in Belarus and how they'll be utilized. It could just be that they get to train the Belarusian military or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, that's the end of part one. Part two will follow shortly, and that will concern what's going on the front line, military aid going to Ukraine, and geopolitical topics as well. Thank you for watching. Take care. Speak to you soon.